tonight, this video is meant to introduce the methods paper assignment. We are heading into week 4 of the course, and if you're following the syllabus, you've noticed that this week what you're going to be working on is a little bit different than what you've done in the previous weeks. So I wanted to make sure it was clear, both what you'll be doing this week and how that will contribute to the paper that is due in a couple of weeks. So we're going to look at the handout and I'll talk you through it and make sure you know what you're doing for this coming period. Okay, so here we are on our home page. We're going to go to content. And if you scroll down to week 4 and do it either way, let's go this way, you'll see that you have, again, a little bit of a different sort of setup. So instead of, as in the previous weeks, doing a bunch of readings, watching a lecture, etc., this week is more of a hands-on week. You are going to be watching a film called The Anthropologist, which will show you sort of a first-hand account of what it's like when an anthropologist does field research. But mainly what you're going to be doing this week is doing sort of the prep work for the first written assignment with it, which is the methods paper, which is due in a couple of weeks, okay? So you're going to be gathering some of the research materials that you're going to need for that assignment. In particular, you're going to be doing the observations and interviews that will contribute to that paper, okay? So I want to show you the handout so you're clear on what you're going to be doing. One sort of side note, I noticed as I was doing this that I had a typo in here in this sort of description part in the sort of the week-to-week content part of the D2L site, where it listed the paper is due on the 19th. It's due on the 24th. So I had the correct date on the handout, right? So I've corrected it now, so it's all good, but I just want to make sure there was no confusion. So it is the later date of the two dates that I had. The later date is the actual due date, so the 24th. So, okay, so here we are again, week 4, and we're going to go to the assignment folder. No, not that assignment folder. We're going to go to these assignments. That's the assignment for this week, which is a discussion. If you go to the assignments tab, this assignment also shows up where it is due in week 6. But if we go to the assignments tab, you see the methods paper right there, and here is the handout. So that is what we're going to take a look at. Okay, so this is the methods paper. Again, it is due on the 24th, which is in week 6. But you are going to spend this coming week, week 4, working on sort of doing the legwork to collect the stuff that will allow you to write that paper. So we're doing it sort of well in advance. I wanted to put in that sort of amount of time so that you can get this stuff done and have plenty of time to write and not have to rush it, okay? So that is the reason for sort of spacing out the steps over a few weeks. Okay. Let me explain what this methods paper is going to be, and then we can talk about sort of what you're going to do right now to ultimately accomplish this. So as the name suggests, this is an assignment that's really meant to sort of introduce you to the kinds of data collection methods that cultural anthropologists use. As you've already learned, 2 of the key sorts of techniques that anthropologists use are interviews and observation, right? So for this assignment, you're going to do some of each of those things, and then you're going to basically write up the results, okay? So you're going to be doing 2 unstructured interviews and 2 observations. What I'm asking you to do is to choose a topic from this list that I provide on the handout and do your interviews and observations around that topic, okay? And you may notice that these look like familiar topics. These are sort of the key topics of this course. So these are big, open-ended, issues, themes. There's all kinds of things you can either ask people about or observe. So I want it to still be quite open, but I did want to sort of get you to choose something that's already sort of one of the things we'll be learning about in the course. So you're going to choose any one of these, gender, family, ethnicity, religion, etc. And then you are going to do 2 interviews and 2 observations on that subject, okay? So, breaking it down even further. So for the interviews, what you'll be doing is composing questions and then posing those questions to someone. You're going to do this twice. And then in some way, recording what happens in that conversation, okay? So you're going to write 8 questions. That's what I'm giving you as sort of, I think, a good number. It's not too long and not too short. You're going to write 8 questions. You're going to find 2 people you can talk to. They can be people that you know, people you don't know. It's really up to you. This is not a formal research project where we'd have to, go through a whole review process and have you have a, consent form for people to sign, etc. Now, that said, you still want to sort of explain to people who you are and what you're doing. I think you can do that in a really straightforward way. Say that you are doing this assignment as part of a university course, and make sure you ask their permission and make sure that they feel okay sitting down with you. So if somebody doesn't want to talk to you, that's absolutely fine. If they start talking to you and they change their mind, that's also fine. So, remember what we talked about in terms of sort of the ethical questions that come up when doing research with people, right? You want to respect where the people who participate in your research are, right, in that moment. So, use your common sense and your knowledge of what it's like to interact with other people to make a decision about whether it's a good thing to continue or not in a particular conversation. All right. Now, when you find your 2 sort of willing interviewees, you can really conduct the interviews sort of in any way, in person, over the phone. You can certainly use, FaceTime or Google Chat or whatever. I would suggest that if you have the option, that you have a live conversation, right? That doesn't mean it has to be in person, but that it's better to have that sort of real-time interaction than, for example, to email somebody a bunch of questions and have them email you back the answers. That is not, technically speaking, sort of the same kind of experience. So again, you don't need to be in the same room with the person, although that has all kinds of benefits as well. But try to have live conversations, okay? So the third component of the interviewing process is that you need to somehow get that information, right? You need to be able to capture it so you can reflect on it and write about it later, right? So just having the conversation and then assuming that you'll remember it all, usually most of us can't remember that well, right? So you have a few options, which I've included in the handout here. You can write notes, right? Like while you're actually physically speaking to someone, you can also be typing something into, a Word document or scratching stuff on a piece of paper, whatever. You can also write notes after the interview, which works surprisingly well, right? If immediately after ending the conversation, you write up everything you can remember, you will remember quite a lot of what happened. And then you can also record it in some way, right? Make a digital recording. A good rule of thumb is to use any 2 of these, right? I usually suggest that you don't put all your eggs in the basket of a digital recording. Sometimes those fail. And also that you have some kind of backup if you're writing notes and, you forget to write something down. So, but it's up to you to decide, but make sure that you capture that information so that you can, again, write about it later. All right, so that's the first part. Second part is you're going to do 2 observations. And again, this is really up to you. There's lots of ways to do it. I am suggesting that you can do sort of virtual observations. You can watch TikToks or, follow social media, something like that. You can also do it live, and it doesn't need to be like a private space, right? It could be, a city park or a store or whatever, right? But you need to find 2 locations that are relevant to your topic where you can spend some time watching what goes on and, again, recording it in some way. Typically, what cultural anthropologists do when they're observing things is to take notes, right? So field notes become a really important way to sort of get a sense of what's going on. One of the, I think, biggest pieces of advice I can give about taking notes about things you observe is to try to write down literally as much as possible, like everything that you see, hear, smell while you're there, okay? It sometimes can be hard to know which of the elements of the things you're observing are going to be important. So it's good to try to capture as much of it as possible, right? So if you're in a store, you may want to not just talk about what's on the shelves, but also what's on the walls. Is there music playing, right? How many people are there? Is it cold? Is it hot, right? All those little details about that space and what's happening in that space, okay? So these 2 sets of activities, the 2 interviews and the 2 observations, are what you're going to be working on in week 4. So I've sort of set aside this coming week for you to go out and do that sort of data collection, all right? Once you've done that, then you'll still have some time to work on actually writing up what you find into the paper that's due in week 6, okay? And that's what the handout goes on to describe. So the paper that you will actually turn in has 2 parts. The first part is that you will provide a detailed description of the interviews and the observations that you did, all right? I don't need you to give me a transcript of your interviews, and I don't need you to turn in your field notes. I want you to, again, write up a sort of detailed summary, and that is what you'll include there. So I do want to know sort of as specifically as you can make it what happened and what you experienced, but you're not going to give me like sort of the raw material. You're going to give me something that you've processed as part of the paper, okay? And then for part 2, I'm asking you to respond to a series of questions that are about the research process that you've just engaged in, right? So things like, you know, did you encounter any problems? What would you do differently next time? You know, what did you learn about these methods, etc. And I've written out those questions for you to kind of specifically respond to. So that'll be part 2 of your paper, all right? What I'm asking you ultimately to turn in is a paper, I say a minimum of 4 pages in length. For many of you, it'll be considerably longer. It's perfectly fine if it's longer. I think it would be very difficult to thoroughly write up all this in less than 4 pages. So if you end up with 2 pages, definitely take a look at the handout, make sure you've done everything. But if it ends up being longer, that's fine, right? More detail is good, and certainly not a problem for this, okay? So again, it's due on the 24th. At the bottom of the handout, I give you the rubric that I'll be using to score it. So bear that in mind as you write, right? That you make sure you've done all these things that are specified both in the handout and more specifically in the rubric, okay? So again, this is just sort of a quick rundown. You have this handout already in D2L. If you haven't already, make sure that you read it going into week 4. And then spend week 4 doing the legwork for this paper, meaning identifying the people you're going to interview, writing your questions, hopefully scheduling the times to speak with them or getting those interviews actually completed, figuring out where you'd like to observe, you know, figuring out when you can go there, and again, taking notes so that you sort of have all that material together, ideally by the end of week 4, and then you have plenty of time to process it and write it up for the assignment called the methods paper. Okay, so that's it. Just a quick overview of the paper. I hope you enjoy the activities. I'm looking forward to seeing your papers. And if you have any questions, let me know. All right, talk to you later. Bye.